What is up, everybody? SchwayZ here. In today's video, I'm extremely excited and honored because of the vehicle standing behind me. We're talking the all-new, highly anticipated Tesla Cybertruck. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about over 30 fun, cool, and interesting features of this pretty triangular-looking pickup truck. So let's get started. Now, before we dive into today's video, I do want to extend a huge thank you to EV Auto of Woods Cross, Utah. If you guys are in the market for a new or used electric vehicle, make sure you reach out to them and let them know that SchwayZ sent you. I'm going to put their information down in the description below. Now, the vehicle I'm reviewing today is actually owned by Alex here at EV Auto, and he calls this thing the Cybertron, and it's very fitting because this thing looks really menacing. He's got an awesome wrap on the outside, some really cool underglow underneath. I'm actually going to throw up some footage right now. If you guys aren't following him already, check it out because he's got some really cool photos and videos of this car, and he actually takes this car to different meets here in Utah. So if you guys want to see this out in the open, then you might want to follow his Instagram. All right, now the first thing I want to discuss are the 3 different trim levels that the Cybertruck comes offered in. The first one is called the Cyber Beast. It's actually not quite out yet. I think there's a handful of deliveries. That one comes with a tri-motor setup. You got 2 in the back, 1 in the front, and that thing has a range of about 320 miles, 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. And obviously that one's going to be the most expensive. We'll talk about pricing here in just a minute. The one tier below that is the all-wheel drive version, and that's this particular vehicle in front of us today, the Cybertron. It's got 1 motor in the back, 1 in the front. This thing has a range of about 340 miles and will do 0 to 60 in just about 3.9 seconds with a top speed of 112 miles per hour. Now, the majority of all-wheel drive Cybertrucks that have been delivered are the Foundation series. It's kind of the first edition. It's about a $20,000 package add-on, but it guarantees you early delivery. One way to tell is you'll see this Foundation badge over here on the inside, and actually on the outside, you're going to have some laser-etched Foundation series badging on the side of the vehicle. Since this vehicle is wrapped, you obviously can't see it, but it also adds a different set of wheels and tires and kind of a more special edition version. That's going to be about $20,000 above the base MSRP of the all-wheel drive version. Now, the lowest trim level, the very last one, is of course the most affordable. It only comes with 1 motor in the back, so it's a rear-wheel drive setup. It's got slower acceleration, it's about 6.5 seconds, and your range is a little bit compromised. You're looking at 250 miles. But if you're trying to save some money, that may be a good option where you can still get the exterior appearance of the Cybertruck, but not have to burn a hole in your wallet. At least not as big of a hole. Okay, now the next cool feature I want to talk about is the stainless steel. And the only place I can really show you that on the Cybertron, since it's wrapped, is this door panel over here. You can see this is stainless steel material, and the entire exterior of the truck is covered in this stainless steel. Now, there's a couple advantages to that. For one, it is somewhat bulletproof. So if you are saving this for a zombie apocalypse, well, you're probably better off in this than like an F-150 Lightning. Now, the interesting thing about this stainless steel is it's a special kind of stainless steel. It's not just your typical kitchen sink like stainless steel material. In fact, the metal presses that they had to use to be able to make some of these curves that you see in the metal, Tesla actually had to develop those presses in order to be able to form the shape of this vehicle, because stainless steel for the most part is pretty rigid, and so they had to create a certain type of stainless steel and a certain type of press in order to get this distinct shape. Now, you may be saying that because this thing is so boxy and it's made out of stainless steel, it's probably like a brick in the wind, and that's actually not true. I don't know how they did it, but the drag coefficient of this is better than an F-150 Lightning. I think part of the reason they were able to do that is you could see there's this curve in the front end of the vehicle. So even though it's kind of a sharp edge, it curves around and moves the air around it. Also, the fact that this is curved up. Also, I think there's actually a little bit of a curve to this back half of the vehicle. It looks pretty straight, but I think they designed a little bit of a curve to it to improve the aerodynamics. In fact, the drag coefficient of this is about 0.34. And in comparison, some of the best sedans on the market, like the Tesla Model S, Lucid Air, those are around 0.2. So this really isn't that much worse than some of the most sleekest looking sedans. So very good job. Props to Tesla for being able to do that. All right, next up, I want to talk about the size of this vehicle, because in photos and videos and even in person, this thing looks massive. I think that has to do with its shape. But this is actually a little bit smaller than an F-150 and a Ram TRX. Let's talk about the dimensions here. All right, now in terms of length, this thing is about 223.7 inches long. For comparison, a Ram TRX is about 232.9 inches long. So it's a little bit shorter than a Ram TRX. And in terms of its height, it's about 70.5 inches tall, which compared to a TRX, which is about 80.9 inches tall, it's almost 10 inches lower than a TRX. Now jumping to the back of the Cybertruck, the width of the vehicle is about 86.6 inches wide without the side view mirrors. Now, in comparison, the Ram TRX is about 88 inches. So the width is really the closest thing to a half-ton pickup truck, but everywhere else, it's a little bit of a smaller vehicle. Somebody did ask me on Instagram if this is wider than a Tesla Model X, and it is. It's about 8 inches wider. All right, now the next cool feature we got to talk about is this windshield. It is the world's largest windshield according to Tesla, and sitting inside the vehicle, it looks it. I mean, it is a massive windshield over here, spans the entire front end of the vehicle. And because this windshield is so big, of course, as most of you know, this is the world's largest windshield wiper. I think Tesla says it's about 75 bucks to replace that, which really isn't that bad, but it is huge and it's pretty wobbly over here too. And they designed it like this because this actually improves the aerodynamics. So when they had the windshield wiper here, the air would get caught. Part of the reason they were able to get that low drag coefficient is by keeping it in the permanent fixed position located over here at the top. Now, in terms of the amount of power it takes to power this thing, Tesla says it's about 1 kilowatt of energy to run this windshield wiper. So it's a very powerful motor, and let me show you what it looks like inside. Okay, so to activate it, Tesla doesn't use any type of windshield wiper stocks. It's actually a button located over here on the steering wheel. So you push this button, and this thing is just huge. I mean, it takes up the entire windshield. It's really crazy to see in action. Even just to hear it, it's crazy. Now, the other thing to mention about this windshield is it is shatterproof. Tesla says you could take a baseball and throw it at 70 miles per hour onto this windshield, and that's how much impact this thing can withstand. Speaking of shattering windows, there's this kind of cool Easter egg on the inside. So if you tap the side of the driver's window, it's Elon's voice on the day of the event where the designer smashed the window. So it's kind of a cool Easter egg, fun to play around with.
Oh man, it didn't go through.
That's pretty cool. Now, you may have noticed one small change from the 2019 Cybertruck they showed off at the event, and that is the side view mirrors. Now, this is a US government regulation. In Europe, I think you can start using cameras, but Tesla wasn't able to get past that, even though they have a camera located right here. So I have heard that you can actually remove these and just rely solely on the cameras, but from the factory, they have to ship the Cybertruck with side view mirrors. Also, this particular Cybertron has these custom, really cool looking rims, but the base Cybertruck comes with a 20-inch wheel on the Foundation series, and it has a removable plastic cap that you can take off, but if you put it on, it looks pretty menacing, and it also adds to aerodynamics and range efficiency. Now, speaking of the wheels, the owner tells me that this is the first set of T-Sportline wheels on the Cybertruck. The first ones in the world of this type of rim is on this Cybertron Cybertruck. It's pretty cool, and this is specifically made for the Cybertruck because not only is it a 6-lug setup, but it's also designed to hold the weight of this vehicle. All right, since we're talking wheels and tires, let's also talk about suspension. The Cybertruck comes with an air ride suspension, and at its highest setting, you can get upwards of 17.4 inches of ground clearance. That is, I think, up there as one of the highest. Maybe the Hummer EV is right up there, but that's better than the Ford Bronco, Jeep Wrangler. I mean, you get some really high ground clearance, perfect for off-roading. The way you activate that is on the inside. So I'll talk about the screen more in just a minute, but if you slide over and click on this car button over here in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll pull up your ride height setting. So right now it's in medium height, but let's set it to high and let me show you what that looks like on the outside. And that is what it looks like at its lowest setting, and that looks extremely low, especially on these large 24-inch rims. This thing looks like a bagged Subaru. No, not like a Subaru, but it does look like a bagged vehicle. All right, now there's actually more to talk about when it comes to the wheels and tires, and that is the fact that the Cybertruck comes with rear wheel steering, and that means that the rear wheels can turn between 3 to 10 degrees in order to improve maneuverability when you're driving in parking lots. And I've tested this out just a little bit, and this is definitely more maneuverable than your typical half-ton pickup truck. Let me show you what that looks like in action. All right, now for the next set of features, we're actually gonna have to jump to the truck bed because there's a lot to talk about. All right, now to talk about the features in the truck bed, we actually have to open up this tonneau cover. This comes standard on every single Cybertruck, but to open it up, you push on this button and it slides open. It sounds a lot better than the one in the Rivian R1T. Even though I like the Rivian, this one sounds a little bit more smooth. Now you can close it as well by pushing this button, and then you can actually pause it by pushing on the opposite button. You can also hold it down. When you let go, it will stop. But I do want to point out that as you open it, take a look at the back there. It opens up that rear window. And so when you close it up, you actually can't see outside that window because, well, the tonneau cover covers it up and then it goes all the way to the end. So let's open this back up again. And then as we do that, I want to open up the truck bed itself, which is a button over here. Now this is a dampened opening. What's interesting here is it always remains at a little bit of an angle until you push down on it. And then it kind of straightens out. And then in terms of closing it, it doesn't have an automatic closing like an F-150 Lightning, but it is pretty light to close. I mean, considering this is stainless steel, it does have a little bit of a spring-loaded action to be able to shut it. I still think it takes, you know, a hand to close. It's not like a pinky, but it is a lot lighter than you would expect. And then you can see that LED light bar. It looks very futuristic, very Tron-like, like Cybertron, get it? Anyways, opening this up, let's talk about the truck bed here. Tesla says this is a 6-foot by 4-foot bed. Now, I do want to point out the fact, it's kind of hard to see on camera. You have this angle that kind of goes the opposite way of the bottom of the truck bed. So as you can see here, this thing isn't perfectly straight. And that's because the tonneau cover actually hides in here. But because of that, you actually have a little bit less room over here at the top than you do at the bottom. So over at the bottom, it's about 6 feet long, but up at the top, you're probably losing about 6 inches right there. So from here to there, it's probably like 5.5 feet. So just keep that in mind. It's not going to be a fully 6-foot bed, but it is still nice because the Rivian R1T is only about a 4.5 foot bed. A couple other things to point out here. You do have some lockable storage located under here. Sad thing is, there is no spare tire. So if you get a flat tire on the road, you're just gonna have to have a friend to come pick you up, or you're gonna have to call AAA. You do have your charging cable here. There is also a drain plug located down here, but a pretty large amount of closed storage space. This is something that Rivian had as well, which I think is very useful, especially for a pickup truck. Now, the bed liner here is a composite-like material. It's not like your typical spray-in bed liner. This is kind of like a plastic, but Tesla says it's very durable and you don't need any other type of bed liner here. It's going to stand the test of time. Next thing I want to point out is this adjustable track system for strapping down different items. So as you can see, it's about halfway down, but you can actually move it around. And that way you can have various different types of cargo back here. Now, the other very important feature back here is this power outlet system. So not only do you have 2 household power outlets here, but you also have a 240 volt power outlet as well. So this can pretty much power like a household dryer. Now the advantage here is the amount of power that this thing can shoot out, because this has a higher amperage rating, and because of that you can actually shoot out about 11.5 kilowatt of power. So if you plug this into your home with the proper adapter, you can actually power your house for more than a couple days using the large battery located inside of this truck. To my understanding, this outlet can shoot out more power than any other pickup truck. I know the F-150 Lightning has one as well, but I think the max amount of power that the F-150 Lightning can shoot out is about 7.5 kilowatt versus this one is 11.5. Now in terms of payload, this thing is pushing heavy duty pickup truck territory. We're talking 2,500 pounds. Most pickup trucks are somewhere around 1,500 pounds. So really impressive numbers there. Now there is another advantage to the Cybertruck over your regular half ton, and that is your towing capacity. The Cybertruck has a maximum towing capacity of 11,000 pounds, also higher than just your average half ton pickup truck. Now, given the fact that this vehicle has so many mechanisms and it's made out of stainless steel, you would think this thing weighs like 15,000 pounds. That's actually not true. Surprisingly, this vehicle in the dual motor setup only weighs about 6,600 pounds. I really have no clue how they made it this light with an electric battery. Now, speaking of weight and how it's relatively light for a vehicle of this size, let's talk about the range and the charging. Okay, now to open up the charge port, it's actually on the driver's side over here near this wheel well, and you push on this plastic piece, it pops open. Now, this vehicle comes with a 123 kilowatt hour battery. So it's not small by any means, but it's a lot smaller than the 200 or so on the Hummer EV. Now, that leads to a range of about 340 miles, which really is impressive considering the weight, considering that this is all stainless steel. It's kind of a triangle in the wind, and the fact that the battery isn't that large either relative to some other trucks. 340 miles is decent. Now, I talked to the owner about this vehicle and asked him what his real life range was. We've had some snow, we've had some cold weather, and he said that 340, 350 is actually pretty realistic. Now, he's only had this vehicle for a few weeks, so it would take testing this car over a year or so so to really get a good idea. But the fact is, this vehicle can get over 300 miles of range. That's pretty decent for a stainless steel pickup truck. Now, the Cybertruck is also the very first Tesla to run on the 800-volt architecture. Now, most Teslas are somewhere around 400 volts. The 800-volt architecture has an advantage of being able to charge quicker. It also has thinner and smaller wires, so it takes less wiring to be able to build an electric vehicle. There's lots of advantages to 800-volt architectures, and there's a handful of cars on the market today that have that. The Porsche Taycan, the Lucid Air, and the Kia EV6 and the Ioniq 5, they all run on the 800-volt architecture, and now the Cybertruck does as well. And that is hypothetically supposed to allow you to charge this vehicle quicker. Now, Tesla says you can add about 136 miles of range in just about 15 minutes. Now, there has been some real-world testing. So Inside EVs, which is a really good reliable source for electric vehicle testing, they were able to plug this into a 250 kilowatt hour charger, and they were able to get 206 kilowatt peak charging rate on the Cybertruck. But that quickly tapered off because a lot of electric vehicles can only maintain their peak charging rate for a certain period of time before it starts to slow down. In their testing, they found that from 11 to 80%, this vehicle took about 45 minutes, which is almost the same as the Rivian R1T, which runs on the 400-volt architecture. So as of right now, it's really hard to tell if there's very many advantages to the Cybertruck being an 800-volt architecture system, but perhaps that's something that could be resolved with a software update. Another thing to keep in mind is the majority, if not all, of the Tesla superchargers out there are 400-volt systems. So until Tesla upgrades all of them to the 800 or 1,000-volt systems, this really isn't going to get any of the benefits of running on an 800-volt architecture. Now, I touched on this in the beginning, but finishing off the powertrain component, this thing has just around 600 horsepower and will do 0 to 60 in just about 3.9 seconds. Now, when the Cyber Beast becomes available, the tri-motor setup, you're going to get over 800 horsepower and 0 to 60 in about 2.6 seconds, which would make this the quickest pickup truck you can buy. All right, now before we jump inside and talk about the interior features, I want to talk about the amount of closed lockable storage. According to Tesla, this thing has 67 cubic feet of lockable storage inside, but about 7.1 of that is this front trunk or frunk. This is actually the first Tesla where you have an outside operated button to be able to open up this frunk. Nice thing is you can actually sit in here, unlike the Rivian R1T, but similar to the F-150 Lightning. And it's a pretty decent amount of space. This is actually where your HEPA filter is located. You got Cybertruck script over here and emergency release as well. And I just like the sound of this thing opening and closing. Sounds very utilitarian. Also very useful to have a front trunk. Hey everyone, I want to tell you about Octane Coffee Company. It is the car-themed coffee company with a variety of different roasts paired with iconic names. You've got Big Block, Race Gas, The Goat. It's perfect for early morning cars and coffee or cruises down the canyon. It is the coffee for all car enthusiasts. Pick up your bag at OctaneCoffeeCompany.com, link is down below, and get 10% off your first order using promo code Octane10. Now back to the video. All right, now to get inside is actually pretty easy to do. You don't actually have any door handles. It's this button, kind of similar to like a Mustang Mach-E. It pushes out the door, and then once you open it up, the little kickstand that pushes this out disappears and you can actually close it. But we want to get inside, so let me show you what that looks like. Starting off with the door panel, it looks very similar to other Tesla products. You've got that same kind of vegan leather material mixed with the white and the black, typical Tesla window switches over here, and then you have your manual opening for the door, but typically you're going to push this electronic release. And I should mention, just like other Teslas, this is a frameless window, so it pops down when you open it up. Kind of an odd storage compartment here where it's this really large opening, but there's really not much you could put out here because it's just going to fall over. So kind of interesting how they designed it, but you do have a large cup holder and storage compartment down here, and you have your audio system. Now moving into these seats, I do want to point out the fact that these are pretty elevated. You have quite a bit of space located underneath here. You got this triangular shape to lift the height of the seat because, well, your head is pretty much right in the highest point of the vehicle. And because the rear seats have to sit a little bit lower so that they're not hitting their head on the peak over there, you kind of have to raise the driver's seat. You do have power seats over here and lumbar support, and you've got the Cybertruck script located over here, very unique to the vehicle. There's actually no Tesla logos on the outside of the pickup truck, and I don't think there's any on the inside. In fact, climbing inside, you can see the steering wheel has the Cybertruck logo, but there's no Tesla logo on the steering wheel. Now, one thing to point out about this door as I'm shutting it is it's very heavy. It feels very sturdy. Also, when you open it up, your grab handle's over here, but you kind of have to push it over here to open it normally. So it takes a little bit getting used to. You kind of have to apply pressure to your palm to open it up, but nothing you can't get used to. Now, talking about this interior, very, very odd. Very, very different. First off, starting off with the steering wheel, it's not the yoke design, thankfully, but it is kind of this squircle. So it's flat on the top, flat on the bottom, and a little bit rounded on the left and the right-hand side, but you get used to it pretty quick. One odd thing here, though, is this is the first vehicle to have steer-by-wire from the factory. And so what that means is there's no physical connection between the steering wheel and the front wheels. And so this is actually full lock, where in normal vehicles, you have to turn it at least 2 or 3 times. Where that gets odd is the fact that you have to get used to it, especially maneuvering in a parking lot. As I was pulling this vehicle around, I noticed that I was turning this vehicle way too far to the left and the right because I just wasn't used to the steer-by-wire. Took a few minutes, but I finally got used to it, but that is kind of odd. I do want to say that I think Infiniti was the very first one to introduce steer-by-wire, but they still had a physical connection as a backstop. This vehicle doesn't have a physical connection, but it does have several redundancies and several sensors in case one of them goes out. Now, in regards to the steering wheel, in typical Tesla fashion, your blinkers are located on the steering wheel. There's no stalks on the left or the right hand side. You've got your headlight controls, and then this roller wheel can be used for a variety of different things like adjusting your steering wheel and adjusting the volume. On the right hand side, you've got this button to open up your cameras over here on this large touchscreen. You've also got your cruise control and autopilot settings along with the roller wheel to adjust that, and the button to activate your large windshield wiper along with your voice activation. Other than that, very simplistic. You do have this large ambient lighting strip located behind the screen. This is one of the first Tesla vehicles to have ambient lighting. You also have it on the door panel. Now the Tesla Model 3 Highland is coming out with that, but I believe the Cybertruck was the first to show it off. Also, something that's very weird and takes getting used to is this massive dashboard. I mean, I could probably put my head over here and put my feet down there and I still wouldn't reach the end. I mean, this is huge. If you need to dust off anything back there, you're gonna have a very difficult time. This is a soft touch rubberized material. Over there, it almost looks like a speaker grill like material. And then you do have a front quarter window, but I will say when I was driving this car for about 5 minutes, this is kind of a large blind spot over here because you can't really see too much out of this area. And then this A pillar, or technically B pillar, kind of gets in the way of things. But very, very large windshield, and it takes just really getting used to the front of this vehicle. You really can't tell where the edge of this vehicle is. It almost seems like it's right where that windshield wiper ends, but then you forget that there's also a front trunk, and so that adds an extra foot or two. So the dimensions of this car are very hard to understand in just my few minutes of driving it. Now let's jump over here. This is a large 18.5-inch touchscreen. I think it's the largest that Tesla has ever put in their vehicle. It's a very snappy software. For one, you can adjust the vehicle positioning and see what's going on. In this mode, you can open up the tonneau cover, the trunk, you can also open up the frunk. And then what's cool here is if I open the door, you can actually see that the door opens on the screen as well. So it's acting in real time, but very, very quick to use, very easy to understand. So I like how Tesla did that, but that's not unusual for Tesla. They have some of the best software in the industry. Now, swiping over to the right, you'll open up your full screen navigation. Again, very quick to use, just as quick as any smartphone you would use. Down here are your quick access buttons. So you got your climate control settings. Similar to a Tesla Model 3 and Model Y, you can adjust the airflow, and then you can turn on your controls over here. You can also regulate the rear seats as well. You can turn the climate on and off. And then down here is just your recently used apps, and then this is your app tray where you can open up various different features. You've got a theater mode, so you can, turn on Netflix, Hulu, whatever, and as you're charging, you can relax. You can open up your messages. There's different apps over here for like toys and streaming and radio. And then your main car vehicle settings is this button over here that I showed off earlier, where you can, of course, again, open up your tonneau cover, your front trunk, your rear trunk, and then you can cycle through your various lights. So this is how you can do your accent lighting on the inside and change that with your ambient colors. Again, very, very snappy and very easy to use software. And then when you're done with that, you just swipe it away. And this is probably one of my favorite features of the Tesla Cybertruck. Now, up above you, this is where it gets a little bit odd because there is no rear view camera mirror like you find in a lot of new vehicles. This is actually a very, very small rear view mirror. I mean, this thing is like the size of something you'd find in a Mitsubishi Mirage, not a large half-ton pickup truck. What's odd here is you can't actually see out the rear because with the tonneau cover closed, there's no visibility. So you'd have to have the tonneau cover open. So how do you drive around with a rear view mirror when the tonneau cover is closed? Well, when you put this vehicle into drive, which is very odd to do because you actually have to push on this button and swipe forward to put it into drive. it opens up your rear view camera. And this is the only way you can see what's going on behind you when the tonneau cover is closed. You have to look out this section. So as you're driving, it takes a little bit getting used to not to look up here, but have to look down here. Luckily, you can adjust it, but I think it's actually better in this position. Now, the other weird thing here is what I showed off earlier, which is very similar to other Tesla products, is you have to swipe to be able to tell the vehicle where you want to go. There's no actual gear stock or gear selector. You actually have to use a touchscreen. And it takes getting used to because I've accidentally put it into reverse when I meant to put it in drive, because in a lot of cars, you swipe up to go reverse. And so I swiped up and I ended up putting it into drive. You do have an emergency set of controls over here at the top. So if this screen dies for whatever reason, you can put it in drive by pushing the buttons up here, and your hazards are located up here as well. Now, while we're up here, I do want to point out that you have this touch sensitive light control over here that you can turn on and off by just tapping on your finger, which is pretty cool. And then your sun visor is pretty cool as well. It's like a magnetic release, so as you get it close to this section, it pops out. It's nice and suede. The entire headliner is this microfiber suede-like material and feels pretty premium overall. On the passenger side, you do have a pretty padded white surface over here that's behind the steering wheel. You can open up a glove box, but you have to do that by pushing the button over here, and that slides out this little tray, and then you can slide it back. And overall, I would say the seats are pretty nice. They have a cool shape to them. They are perforated. They have heated and ventilated functionality. You, of course, have a heated steering wheel as well. And then moving underneath this screen, you have this large storage bin over here where you could put like a purse or a large water bottle, and it has some ridges so it doesn't fly all over the place. And you got 2 wireless charging pads. This is also a place where you can put your keys, 2 cup holders, soft touch padding over here, and a pretty decent sized storage compartment in the middle. Now, jumping into the second row, same button activated door release like on the first row. Nice soft touch materials on the door panel. This thing does open 90 degrees, so it's easy to put, you know, car seats or whatever in here. Very simple to do. Soft touch materials, white leather. You have your window switch over here, electronic release over there. And then this makes a little bit more sense. You have a little storage compartment with a water bottle slot, and then a larger storage compartment here. Now, speaking of the speakers, I failed to mention that it is a 15 speaker setup, but you also have 2 subwoofers and 1 amplifier. So it's a very good sound system located inside of the Cybertruck. Moving into these seats, again, similar shape to what you find in the first row. Now, this does raise up. You actually just pull on the strap, and this entire seat raises up, typical of what you'd find in a pickup truck, but it gives you this nice flat loading floor, lots of space to put a bunch of stuff in here, so lots of cargo volume inside of the vehicle. Now we pull on this to lower it. Getting back here, let's talk about the legroom. It's a really decent, lots of space, what you would expect from a mid-sized pickup truck. And then you do have a 9.4-inch touchscreen back here. You can turn the ventilation on and off. You can actually watch movies back here as well, which is really cool. So a lot of times vehicles have the screens located in the back seat, but you just have one located over here. And not only can it control your heated seats back here and your ventilation, but it can also show you movies. So that's pretty cool. Your airflow is actually located over here along the side. Moving below the screen, you do have a pretty large amount of space for a middle person to fit their feet. And then in terms of what you're looking at out above you, it's a very large piece of glass, very tinted too, but it gives you a really cool look out of the top. Now, speaking of headroom, it's pretty decent. I'm about 5'9", and I've got quite a few inches above me, and I would say it's a pretty comfortable cabin. I do like the ambient lighting located on the door, and I do like this glass roof. I'm a sucker for glass roofs in any car, and this car does it well. Now, speaking of sitting in the interior, in typical Tesla fashion, you do have a high-grade biodefense weapon HEPA filter. It's like a hospital-grade HEPA filter that can filter out about 99.7% of all viruses going on outside. So it does cleanse the air on the inside. So if you live in an area with bad climate, like we do here in Utah, you can convince your wife that you need a Cybertruck for the health of you and your family. All right, now to finish off this video, let's talk about the warranty. Tesla offers a 4-year, 50,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty and an 8-year, 150,000-mile powertrain warranty. That's pretty impressive. Now let's finish it off with pricing. That's where it gets kind of interesting. So the base version is going to start just around $61,000. That's the rear-wheel drive setup with only about a 250-mile range. That one's coming out next year. The current version is this dual motor and the Cyber Beast. The dual motor version starts just around $80,000. But if you want to be one of the first individuals to take delivery, you're going to have to get the Foundation Series, which is the vehicle behind me. That's a $20,000 option on top of the base trim. So you're looking at about a base MSRP of $100,000 for the dual motor setup. That being said, it's pretty much fully equipped. Now the last trim level, the Cyber Beast with the tri-motor setup, that one I've been told is starting to come out, and that one starts at $100,000. So I'm sure if you want to get like the foundation series of that, it may be $120,000 plus. So pricing is pretty expensive, but if you compare the dual motor at 80 grand to like a Rivian R1T or an F-150 Lightning with the limited trim level, it's starting to become a little bit more normal. At the same time, this vehicle gets a lot of looks. So if you're one of the earliest individuals to pick one of these up, you're gonna get more attention from this car than any Rivian or any F-150. Now, give it a few years, it's probably gonna die down a little bit, but given the polarizing looks of this car, I don't think this is ever gonna become like a pedestrian vehicle. Every time you drive around, people are gonna be looking at this thing. All right, lastly, to finish off this video, let's jump inside and take this thing for a little drive. All right, so setting off in the Cybertruck, to turn it on, you just simply push on the brake. Again, you gotta get used to that touchscreen control to put it into drive. But like I mentioned earlier, the steer-by-wire system takes getting used to, and it takes getting used to the proportions of this vehicle because it does feel larger to maneuver than some other pickup trucks I've driven. Even though this does have the rear wheel steering, it just feels large. I don't know where the edge of this vehicle is, but again, when you own the vehicle, it's not something you can't get used to. It's just initial impressions. Now, I drove this vehicle around for just a few minutes before I started filming, and I've kind of gotten used to the square steering wheel, and I kind of like it. It's almost easier to turn the steering wheel when it's square than when it's circle, but I'm still glad it's not a yoke steering wheel. Now, we're just gonna brake on it and do a quick little acceleration here. Wow, no, it's pretty quick. It's not Rivian R1T, Hummer EV quick, even Tesla Model 3 Performance, but for a vehicle of this size, I think 4 seconds 0 to 60 is realistic, and it almost feels like it has some better high-end torque than like 0 to 30. So like 30 to 60, this thing feels quicker than, you know, just starting off the line. Now, there are a couple other things that take getting used to. Aside from the steering wheel, I'm not super familiar with Tesla controls, and getting used to the turn signal on the steering wheel, it does take some getting used to. The other thing that takes getting used to is that rear view mirror. Driving it after a few minutes, I finally am looking down here, but I still keep catching myself looking up top, even though that mirror is really just pointless, and it's also kind of flimsy looking. Now, I'll say the car is pretty quiet. It's more quiet than I expected, given how much glass there is. It doesn't have that echo effect that I found in the Model Y. But you know, driving this at higher speeds, it doesn't feel much louder than your average truck. In fact, this may be a little bit quieter than like an F-150. The one thing that you will notice though, and I'm actually staring at somebody right now who's taking a photo of this vehicle, is how much attention this car gets. It is truly an insane amount of attention. And that has to do with a variety of different reasons, right? For one, this thing is a triangle on wheels. Two, there's very few of them on the road. And three, it is a Tesla, and it's, you know, pretty much the future. It's kind of interesting to see. So if you are the type of person that doesn't like getting attention, then don't buy a Cybertruck, because even me just driving 2 blocks from the dealership where I filmed at, people were going nuts. It's really crazy, but it's also kind of cool. It makes you feel like you have something kind of special. Now, I also am surprised that you hear a little bit more of the motor sound coming from this car than I've heard in some other Teslas. It's not a fake sound by any means. They're not pumping anything in, but you can definitely hear the motors activating, and I like it. It adds a little bit more drama when you're driving the vehicle. And the regen braking is very similar to other Teslas. It's pretty strong. I believe you can adjust it over here on the screen. Now, in terms of ride quality, we're about to drive over some bumps here, and I drove over some bumps earlier today when I was driving this car around, and it's pretty smooth. I would say it's softer than a Model Y, which I just recently reviewed. Smoother than that, and this is sitting on some low profile tires and 24-inch rims. So, you know, the regular standard Cybertruck is going to be even softer than this vehicle because this has some aftermarket wheels and tires, which I think add a good effect to the exterior, but they definitely compromise a little bit of the ride quality. So how does this stack up as a truck compared to some of the competition? Well, if I needed an electric pickup truck for whatever reason, like I didn't want to get a gas pickup truck, and I'm using it for pickup truck-like things, I'd personally pick the F-150 Lightning. Even though the Lightning, out of all the electric vehicles, isn't my favorite, I think it's probably one of the most truck-like. Secondly, this one probably is a little bit more truck-like or more usable as a truck than the Rivian R1T. I think the R1T is a little bit compromised because its bed is only about 4.5 feet. This thing has a much larger bed, really good payload, same towing capacity as the R1T, but I think it's more usable as a pickup truck than the R1T is. At the same time, the R1T is a little bit more normal, right? You're not going to get as much attention in that thing as you are in this. And there are some advantages to being able to reach into the truck bed and grab stuff from the side rather than have to kind of climb in like you do with this one, because that slope in the back makes it very difficult to actually reach in and grab items. So there are pros and cons to it. At the end of the day, it's what you enjoy. And I'm glad vehicles like this exist. At least there are some options for people to buy something that's not just the same run-in-the-mill pickup truck that looks exactly the same. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. There was definitely a lot to talk about with this pickup truck. Very unique features, some that you've seen before, some that I really haven't. And if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos. Also check me out on all the social media at SchwayZ_, and let me know your thoughts on the Cybertruck. Would you take this over the competition, and why? Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay SchwayZ, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.